Thank you for having us at South by Southwest. My name is Ramses Alcade, CEO of Neurable, a company that builds wearables powered by neurotechnology. Today, I'll be going over the future of work and the role that neurotechnology may play. When we consider change, there is one organ that is a primary driver, the brain. This is why we'll take a look at neurotechnology as opposed to other solutions. When considering core challenges over symptoms, I hope I can convince you today that the brain plays a primary role. Our brain literally dictates our reality. So what is the future of work? The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development addresses this question by saying that the future of work is the digitalization and globalization that have sparked radical shifts in how we live and work. The coronavirus crisis has accelerated these beyond anything we could have imagined. Simply said, the future of work is a look at how rapid developments in technologies impact established work systems, theories, and issues. For example, remote work was certainly a thing before the pandemic, but now we have big industry voices like Google and Microsoft and many more allowing for remote work even after the pandemic. From our perspective, the future of work largely affects four key areas. Surely there's more, but these are the main four that we want to highlight. First one is the move to remote work. This is a very apparent paradigm shift of an office-only culture to a hybrid remote office culture. The second is digital communication. Our emphasis on technology-facilitated communication has risen. Look at us, for example. This is South by Southwest. It's a world-famous conference, having convened in person for over 30 years, and we're all here connected digitally across the world. The third is diversity and inclusion. This is a reflection of our times and the relevant shifts in work, meaning that our workforce demographic is shifting, and with that, the relevant social norms, processes, tools, and understanding that goes along with it. We're seeing some of the strongest moves toward diversity and inclusion, not just of people of color or sexual preference, but also of ideas and perspectives. And lastly is reskilling. As technology continues to evolve at the pace that we presently have, it's only natural that some applications may become obsolete as new ones appear. But we have a responsibility to help usher and allow for an equitable future, which would require reskilling those whose occupations might be affected. Because the future of work is essentially a nod to our advances as humans, overall, the intent of the progress has been positive. How many of you have been able to connect with loved ones across the world or were fortunate enough to work from home while the pandemic raged? This is all due to the progress we've made as a society, paving the path for the future of work. My parents, for example, used to communicate via mail, and it used to take them multiple weeks to discuss a topic. My dad would send a piece of mail to my mom. She'd reply back, and about 1 to 2 weeks later, he'd hear from her. Now we just text each other. Now we just Zoom each other. Now we just FaceTime each other. And this is really incredible that we can do this. And it's a testament to our progress as humankind. And now I'm going to talk about some of the statistics about the future of work and its benefits. Right now, 42% of the US labor force now works from home full-time. This has led to a positive shift toward the attitudes of remote work. 83% of employers now say that the shift to remote work has been successful for their company, compared to 73% in June of 2020. Remote work also boosts productivity. Remote workers demonstrate 35 to 40% more productivity than people who work in corporate offices. And perhaps the biggest signal is that 44% of individuals would even take a pay cut to be able to work from home forever. As with all good things, there comes a cost. Today, although we specifically call this the future of work, elements of this are already here and speak to the advent of change as opposed to a future point in time. Often, especially when technology progresses at unprecedented speeds, there are known, but worse, unknown costs. Tying these things together, the pains that we see are largely brain-based. Other products or solutions might treat symptoms, but with such big change, we propose to tackle the core issue. The technological progress we've made in how we work is not pure benefit, and it should be explicitly made clear that throwing technology at a technological problem is not always the best solution. Anything new requires change, and change often necessitates some sort of friction. We need to use technology intentionally while being aware of its consequences. From our research at Neurable, we've seen three main areas of pain associated with today's change as they pertain to the topic of the future of work. First one's productivity, or how well you can focus and do work over a given period of time. The second one is burnout, and how quickly you get overwhelmed and overcapacitated when it comes to your capability. And the third one is mental health. A negative consequence not necessarily felt physically, but can be monitored, is the idea of productivity, both personally and professionally speaking. As we move toward remote work, we require new systems in place for personal accountability, with the obvious change being that the sacrifice of social accountability as we work from home these days instead of the office is now gone. The strong shift in our work life makes for a disruption in our normal habits and ways of doing things. Habits are one of the strongest behavioral patterns that dictate how we move throughout the world. A disruption in our habit therefore disrupts our productivity. Lastly, distractions, something we all know affects us and yet we still succumb to them. Distractions in the form of notifications, new work environments, and more eat at our valuable attention and mental compositions throughout the day, exacerbating bad habits and leading to lapses in mental health. Now I want to dive into a few of the areas in our brains that impact our productivity. The first is the limbic system, where we handle our stress response. Here's your takeaway: reducing stress is always best. Our stress response hijacks the rest of our brain because, evolutionarily speaking, we think we're going to die. The next area is the prefrontal cortex. My advice here is don't multitask. We can only attend to one thing or task at a time. Trying to do many tasks at once ends up hurting us and actually fatigues us at a greater rate than had we just done them separately. A third is the parietal cortex. Reduce your distractions. Reducing distractions helps to allow the association regions to put in order all the external stimuli coming in. Having to sort through all the data that's incoming to make sure that only the relevant information makes it to us actually takes time and energy. The next area I want to cover is mental health. Today is more commonly spoken about and better understood than any part of our modern Western history. Studies indicate that 3 in 5 people are lonely. And since Corona, loneliness has increased by 13% and continues to rise. Loneliness is one of the biggest factors in mental health issues of anxiety and depression. A compromised mental health composition leads to decreased physical challenges like immune function, which ultimately lends to a downward spiral that prevents an individual from overcoming their mental health issues. These issues, along with having less time in our day, leads to decreases in physical activity. People are just less motivated to get up and exercise, further exacerbating the issues of mental health and preventing work-life balance. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-beings, and trying to pinpoint where in the brain we look at for mental health. Well, that's all over. There's different regions of the brain that contribute, and it really is difficult to overcome. The last area I want to cover is burnout. Mayo Clinic describes burnout as work-related stress, either physical or emotional, that leads to a reduced sense of accomplishment and loss of personal identity. Can you imagine being so tired that you're not proud of your work and you feel like you're losing yourself? Does this sound like any of you? What is surprising is that numerous studies have shown that we're working longer hours than ever before. People are multitasking even when they're not conscious about it. And this leads to lower productivity, greater rate of fatigue. Also, the mediums of our interactions have gotten more fatiguing. For example, meeting over Zoom versus in person. Trying to pinpoint where burnout happens most in the mind, we can look at the limbic system. It is an integral system for emotion forming, motivations, behaviors, autonomous, and endocrine function, and consolidating memories. It's also where we do our fight, flight, or freeze responses. Burnout studies have shown the limbic system is highly involved. Other areas include the midbrain structures like the hippocampus for memories, amygdala that handle stress responses and emotions, and cortical areas like the prefrontal cortex, where memories, decisions, and voluntary emotional regulation occur. Now I've covered on these three big topics. Next, I want to go through some of the challenges associated with the future of work through three different lenses. The next section, I'll break down papers on the science behind three areas of productivity, mental health, and burnout. So what is productivity? In the simplest words, it is how much you can accomplish on a given task during a specific amount of time. One of the biggest variables that affects productivity is how well your mind can sustain attention on said task. But most of the time, people oscillate in and out of focus. So what is attention? Attention is a cognitive process of your mind regulating resources so that you can focus on a specific task. Key thing, specific task. In other words, how much energy you give something. Your prefrontal lobe either increases or decreases excitation based on task. Our attention is impacted by many variables, including distractors, sleep, task difficulty, rewards, and enjoyment. The more attention we give to a task, the more our cognitive load increases. Cognitive load being how much mental capacity we have to do work. For example, think about your computer. You know how you can hear the fan whir whenever you have a million tabs open? That's your brain when you're trying to multitask. In a laboratory setting, we can measure attention and productivity through looking at a person's reaction time. Usually, the more focused you are, the faster your reaction time. As you lose focus, your reaction time increases. In this experiment by Esterman, a participant was asked to sustain their attention on a single task over 8 minutes. The blue part of the line represents a person who was focused or in the zone, and the orange line represents when they were out of focus. What you can clearly see from this picture is that over time, a person's attention decreases, and eventually they get distracted and unproductive. Being out of focus increases a person's reaction time by 10% and errors by 8%, meaning you are working more slowly and you're creating more mistakes. Sometimes over half of your time working is spent battling distractions. And this is just over an 8-minute period. Imagine a workday with no breaks, back-to-back meetings on Zoom, and constant bombardments of notifications. And think about how that affects your productivity. In the next slide, I want to discuss mental health. There has been a huge revolution in mental health markers and discoveries. Studies have showed that every single year, more and more information is being found. For example, gamma waves, which are responsible for problem solving, are being suppressed, and theta bands, which are tied to drowsiness, are being strongly presented in individuals with depression. Also, individuals in depression show a greater randomness in their brain network, which is a sign of impaired IQ. What is exciting and relevant is that these discoveries have all been non-invasive. And what this means is that we're discovering more and more biomarkers that enable for future detection of mental health related issues earlier and opportunities outside of the laboratory for mental health solutions available both medically and commercially. Burnout is real and significantly impacts the quality and quantity of an individual's work, as well as it affecting their brain. In this study, they are measuring an important brainwave connected to attention, IQ, aging, and decision-making called the P300 brainwave. Typically, the larger the amplitude of the brainwave, the better your cognitive state. And here you see an individual who is burnt out versus one who is not. And what you can see is that an individual who is burnt out shows a significantly lower amplitude. Now take that into account if you're in charge of leading a team or making decisions, being creative or writing code. You are literally using an inefficient version of yourself who is less creative, has an older or slower mind, and makes worse decisions. How do you even know when you should take a break? When should you be powering through versus when are you actually running on fumes? When does a 5-minute break lead to 2 hours of more productivity? These are the questions that neurotechnology has the ability to answer, and I'll be covering these shortly. To wrap all these concepts together, here's an analogy. We liken the brain and how it handles information as a glass of water. How much water in the glass reflects how much cognitive load, or in other words, how many things your brain can process at the same time. For example, the email you're writing, the move you're worrying about, or the video you're watching. The size of the glass corresponds to how many total things your brain can handle. This is affected by numerous stressors such as sleep, anxiety, or whether you took a vacation or not. An excellent night's sleep, for example, might increase the glass size, whereas being anxious about an exam might make it smaller. If what you're working on requires a lot of attention or water in this situation, the glass overflows. And this will mean that you're going to start making mistakes or working slower to compensate. Thus, your productivity will drop. And if the glass gets too small because of long work hours or inadequate rest, you end up burning out. Long-term burnout can lead to numerous mental health issues like depression, where the glass size remains small even after stressors in your life are gone. You just don't have the energy or motivation to get up in the morning, which leads to further issues on productivity, burnout, and mental health issues. It's a very difficult cycle to break out of. We need the right tools and practices to help empower individuals to do this. And with the identification of so many biomarkers using non-invasive methods, neurotechnology has the potential to give us the tools to better ourselves and hopefully manage our work-life balance. One proposed methodology for tackling productivity is to look at flow state. At Neurable, we've had the fortune to work with amazing companies looking at the future of human performance, including Red Bull's Human Performance Team, the Flow Research Collective, Booz Allen Hamilton's Human Performance Team, the US Air Force, and more. It's known that people learn best along a sweet spot continuum. Not too hard, not too easy, just right. If something you're trying to learn is too difficult or stressful, it prevents data encoding, making learning harder. If the material is too easy, it leads to a lack of engagement and retention, once again making learning harder. What we built with these groups is a system called PAVE, Performance Adaptive Virtual Engine. PAVE adjusts the difficulty algorithmically based off your stress inputs from your brain. Lowering the difficulty if the score became too low, or increasing the difficulty if the score became too high. Adaptive immersive learning environments that give you feedback about your performance can also lead to future benefits. When it comes to mental health, there's a lot of companies working on tackling this area, like Flow Neuroscience, that is selling neurostimulators to help individuals battle depression. Flow Neuroscience works by using a laboratory technique called transcranial direct current stimulation, or TDCS, where an electric current is non-invasively applied to a user to stimulate, in this case for depression, their frontal lobe. TDCS works by stimulating areas of your brain that may have been suppressed due to mental health issues like depression. In laboratory studies, TDCS has demonstrated a reduction in depressive symptoms like anxiety and suicidal thoughts, which is great. But why don't we see these devices everywhere? One of the biggest challenges for consumer neurotechnology is demonstrating effectiveness. For example, in laboratory settings, usually higher powered machines and more precise systems are used. So there's a great hurdle toward acceptance in demonstrating efficacy. Do these lower powered solutions work? Startups will need to address these questions with their own products for customer trust to grow. Other hurdles include that neurotechnology can be frightening without understanding the science behind it. For a layperson, electrifying your brain doesn't sound like something you want to do. So creating safety, educating the public, all of that is an important step toward consumer adoption. What Flow and many other neurotech companies do show is that we're currently in the beginning of a consumer tech future, and we expect to see many more neurotech solutions becoming available. And last but certainly not least, this is a first look at a product we're building at Neurable. Smart headphones built with brain sensing technology. What Fitbit or Apple Watch do to your fitness, we are doing but for your state of mind. This technology uses fluctuations in brain activity and special algorithms to estimate how a person uses their attention. A device that could provide you with tracked performance states and correlates the data to your behavior and activities is a very, very powerful tool for combating burnout. This isn't something that's coming in 10 years. This is something that's coming very, very soon. The chart shows what a day with these kinds of insights look like. We currently have team members at Neurable wearing these headphones while they work in an effort we call dogfooding. Here is just one plot of an individual's focus while they work over 3 hours. The higher the focus, the more in the zone the individual is. In laboratories, attention can be inferred by looking at reaction time. But what we have here is an algorithmic interpretation based on brain data of users' attention level, which is shown in the black line. We also had them self-report and label their workday according to how focused they were throughout the day, which is shown in the blue dots. What we see here is a very nice correlation between the self-reported and the algorithm. Over time, we can see what kind of activities or stimuli affects one's attention over time, helping people better understand what the causes their burnout and what actually gives them energy. And this is still a work in progress, but really what we're showing here is the beginning of something much bigger, a 0 to 1, if you will. But let me highlight some key insights. First, we learned that she was a morning person. During the morning and early afternoon, she was able to maintain a solid level of attention, aside for her lunch break. Afterwards, she began to fatigue, and then we asked her to take a 5-minute break. And what we ended up seeing is that during this 5-minute break, it actually allowed her to recover her fatigue to a point that she was able to do meaningful work for the rest of the day. Had she not taken that break, she could have continued down this hard crash of fatigue and actually been less productive at work. So not only did we recommend her to take a break when she was fatiguing, but we can also help her optimize her day. Our suggestion would be for her to eat a bigger breakfast and have a late lunch. That way she can use the most optimal cognitive time for herself to do the most important work. Then before fatiguing and burning out, she can take her lunch break, and hopefully that will allow her to recover enough to end the day strong and get more done with the same amount of time. The future of work is now. Because technology changes faster than we as people can naturally adapt, it has led to unintended friction and consequences. The brain is the main character of these challenges, and neurotechnology with our well-being in mind can actually help us with these challenges. Neurotechnology is not science fiction. It's available today, and for some individuals, their products are even available now. As I mentioned, we're very close to announcing our flagship product. Please check our socials and newsletters if you'd like to learn more about the future of work in neurotechnology. Thank you.